Hey everybody, it's Corey Redderkop here at the Langley Chamber of Commerce. It is the morning of April 3rd, so happy belated Liberation Day down in the States. We spent a couple of hours yesterday going through all the news from Trump and his announcements on tariffs. So here's what you need to know. So first, the steady as she goes news. The impacts on Canada remain unchanged. So what this President Trump announced were 10% global tariffs, a baseline tariff of 10% on every country in the world. Um, there was a big list of that he held up in the Rose Garden of countries that have higher individualized tariffs. And there's an online, there's 8 pages like that big sign he held. So it's every country faces a baseline tariff of 10%, not Canada, not Mexico, but every other country is 10%. And then some have higher tariffs. China 34%, India 26%, the EU 20%, which are based on they're saying unfair trade practices. What actually happened is no one in the States went and calculated what are your tariff and non-tariff barriers in country X. What they did was they figured out, well, what's the trade deficit that we have with that country? And they divided that by how many inputs they have or imports they have to the States. And they came up with a percentage. And that percentage is what's the percentage they've used for all these countries. So a bit of an odd way of going about it, but there you go. So the baseline 10% on every country takes effect on Saturday. So not a lot of time to make any changes there. Um, given that it's Thursday. And then the individual tariffs go into effect on April 9th. So a little bit, a few days beyond that. So maybe a bit more time to negotiate and see if for those countries to see if they can change anything. I noted Canada and Mexico are not included on the list of countries impacted by today's announcement, and here's why. Canada and New Mexico already have tariffs in place, the fentanyl tariffs, as I call them, from earlier in March, which were brought in by under the pretense of battling fentanyl and illegal migration, which we know is a pretense. Those remain in effect. We did have that; they were punted until April 2nd, and we did have the exemption for CUSMA or USMCA compliant goods. So going forward, now that we know the certainty here is going forward, those tariffs, that order is still in effect, but that exemption is still in effect. So whether you call it CUSMA or USMCA, new NAFTA, if you're using that trade agreement and meeting the country of origin requirements and everything else so that you can use that trade agreement to actually claim preferential treatment. Which if you're not, this is now the time you need to be doing that and figuring out with your trade broker how to make sure that happens. If you need connections to logistics to trade brokers, we've got a ton of them on our tariff toolkit that you can contact. Those compliant goods will see 0% tariff continuing going forward. Non-compliant goods that don't use that will have a 25% tariff. That was the one that was threatened. And energy that's not compliant will be a 10%. So nothing really changes for the last month to now for Canada. And that's what we're facing going forward. The bad news is the president confirmed the 25% tariffs on foreign made vehicles will be going ahead as of April 3rd. So today they're in effect. And the steel and aluminum tariffs will continue as well. And that's a big one that we have a lot of concern about here. Lots of people get inputs. There's retaliatory tariffs from Canada and that. So they get inputs. Those are impacting us. And a lot of our businesses do send things to the States, which have steel and aluminum components. And remember, it's not just raw steel and aluminum. There's a whole bunch of derivative products that are included as well. So it's kind of right down the product chain there. Um, so that was kind of steady as she goes news. The bad news. Where's this a little bit of good news? Well, if you read into the background of that came along with the presidential order, it mentions that if and when the pre-existing tariffs, so the ones that Canada and Mexico already have, the fentanyl tariffs, if those are terminated, and so if we can convince them that we've done what we need to do and we kind of can negotiate those away. The USMCA compliant goods will then continue to have 0% treatment going forward. So in effect, for people who are using CUSMA USMCA trade agreement, it's back to free trade, and will be tariffed at 0%. Anything not using those tariffs will be at 12%. So not 25, but 12. And energy and potash, regardless, are going to be non-tariffed as well, and they'll be free to trade. So it's giving us a little bit of a hint of an off ramp of where we can of where what will happen going forward if we can continue to push back on what really has been counterproductive efforts by the states. The Langley Chamber has been wildly opposed to the threat and now the imposition of U.S. tariffs, the cost they're going to impose on Canadian and American businesses, Canadian American consumers, and for what purpose we are upending a decades long mutually beneficial trade agreement and trade partnership to accomplish very, very little.